I was always an atheist, not the quiet kind who simply doesn't believe and goes about their life. No, I was the loud type, the kind who loved to debate, provoke, challenge anyone who mentioned God in my presence. To me, religion was the opium of the masses, as Marx said, a crutch for the weak who couldn't face the harsh reality of existence. My name is Michael. I'm 37 years old, and I'm a philosophy professor at a private university in Boston. I spent years studying, educating myself, building solid arguments against the existence of God. I read Nietzsche, Sartre, Dawkins. I could recite dozens of biblical contradictions by heart, logical fallacies, and the idea of an omnipotent and benevolent creator. I was, by my own standards, intellectually superior to anyone who needed an imaginary God to give meaning to their life. My classes were famous on campus. I didn't just teach philosophy. I deconstructed beliefs. I took pleasure in watching that religious student in the back of the room become increasingly uncomfortable while I dismantled, piece by piece, the arguments for God's existence. Some fellow professors thought I was arrogant. I thought they were intellectually dishonest for not having the courage to speak the truth. My personal life was as empty as my spiritual life, but I never admitted it. I lived alone in a small apartment in Cambridge, had no serious relationships. My parents had died in a plane crash when I was 22, and I had distanced myself from the rest of the family because of my positions on religion. My mother was a devout Methodist, and I had spent the last years before her death trying to convince her she was wasting her life on a fantasy. I never succeeded, and after she died, that remained as an open wound that I hid beneath layers of intellectual arrogance. It was on a Tuesday in September that everything changed. I was teaching a class on existentialism and atheism to a group of sophomores. There were about 45 students in the room. Most admired me. Some silently hated me. I was in the middle of a brilliant explanation about how the idea of God was a human psychological projection when I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It was like someone had driven a knife into my heart. The pain was so intense I lost my breath mid-sentence. I held onto the desk, trying to breathe, but the pain only increased. I vaguely heard students screaming, someone running to call for help. Then my legs gave out, and I fell to the floor. The last thing I remember before blacking out was thinking, with bitter irony, that I was having a heart attack just like the one that killed my father, and that soon I would cease to exist, as I had always believed would happen. No heaven, no hell, just nothingness. But I was wrong. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the classroom anymore. I wasn't in a hospital. I wasn't anywhere I could recognize. I was on a dirt road, surrounded by empty fields stretching to the horizon. The sky was a uniform gray, no sun, no clouds, just a diffuse luminosity that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. There was no sound at all. No wind, no birds, no traffic noise in the distance. Absolute silence. I stood up, confused, looking around. I was wearing the same clothes I had in class, jeans, dress shirt, shoes. Everything seemed real, solid. It didn't have that nebulous quality that dreams have. This wasn't a dream. Michael, a voice said behind me. I spun around. There was a man standing on the road, just a few meters away. I don't know how I hadn't seen him before. He wore simple clothes, a white tunic tied at the waist, sandals. He had long hair and a beard, tan skin, dark eyes that looked at me with an intensity that made me take a step back. "Who are you?" I asked, and my voice sounded strange in the absolute silence of that place. "Where am I?" "You know who I am," he replied, and his voice was calm, patient. "And you know where you are." "No, I don't. And no, I don't know who you are. This is a dream, or I'm having hallucinations. It's probably the brain dying, creating random images while neurons stop functioning." He smiled, but it was a sad smile, always looking for material explanations for everything. "Michael, even now." "Wait," I said, feeling a chill run up my spine. "You're saying that you're—" No, this is ridiculous. You don't exist. And yet, here I am," he said, spreading his arms. "And here you are. If you're suggesting what I think you are, then prove it. Show me your magical powers. Turn water into wine, walk on water, resurrect someone. Actually, where are the other people? If this were real, there should be billions of souls around here, right? He started walking and gestured for me to follow. For some reason I couldn't explain, I obeyed. This isn't heaven, Michael, he said as we walked side by side down the empty road. Nor is it hell. It's an in-between place, a space where I can talk to you before you make your final choice. Final choice, I repeated. So you're saying I died, that I had a fatal heart attack, and now I'm, what, being judged? I didn't come to judge you. I came to show you something you always refuse to see. If you struggle with your faith or lack thereof, know that questioning is human. But closing your heart completely can make you lose something essential. Stay open to dialogue, even if it's internal. We walked in silence for a time I couldn't measure. It could have been minutes or hours. Time didn't seem to work right in that place. The road continued infinitely ahead, never changing, never arriving anywhere. Finally, I stopped walking. This is absurd, I said more to myself than to him. None of this is happening. I'm on the classroom floor. My brain is failing, and it's creating this elaborate fantasy based on years of studying religion. It's just neurochemistry. If this is just neurochemistry, he said, stopping and facing me, then why are you so scared? I'm not scared, I lied. You are, because deep down, Michael, you've always had doubts. You've always had that small voice asking, what if I'm wrong? You silenced it with arrogance and knowledge, but it was always there. That hit me harder than I'd like to admit, because it was true. There were nights, especially after a few drinks, when that doubt would surface. What if there was something more? What if my mother had been right? But I always pushed those thoughts away, classified them as weakness, as remnants of childhood religious conditioning. Even if you're real, I said, try to regain my intellectual balance. It doesn't prove anything about divine goodness or justice. The world is full of suffering. Children die of hunger. Wars destroy millions of lives. Diseases torture innocent people. If you're God or son of God, or whatever you are, then you allow all of this. What kind of benevolent being would do that? He said, and there was something in his tone that was almost tired. The problem of evil. The oldest argument against me. Let's explore this, Michael. Let's see what you really understand about suffering. He touched my shoulder, and suddenly we weren't on the empty road anymore. We were in a slum. I immediately recognized it as being from Chicago, from the characteristic buildings, the narrow alleys, the broken streetlights. It was night, and there were gunshots in the distance. I saw a woman running, carrying a small child in her arms. She was desperate, crying, screaming for help. Behind her, 2 armed men were chasing her. We have to do something, I shouted, taking a step forward. But my body wasn't moving right, as if I were stuck in invisible gelatin. You can't interfere, Jesus said beside me. This already happened. We're just observing. The men caught up with the woman. One of them ripped the child from her arms while the other held her down. She screamed, begged, offered anything. They laughed, and then they shot her in front of the child. I turned my face away, nauseated. See? I said when I could speak again. This. How do you allow this? How does a loving God let a mother be murdered in front of her own child? I didn't kill that woman, Michael. Men with free will made that choice. Free will? That's your excuse? You created the universe, but can't stop 2 murderers because they have free will? What kind of twisted logic is that? The scene changed. Now, we were in a hospital. A pediatric ICU room. There was a girl, maybe 7 years old, in a bed, connected to machines, bald from chemotherapy. Her parents were beside her, holding hands, praying. Childhood cancer, I said bitterly. Another proof of your infinite goodness. What did this child do to deserve this? What's the grand divine plan here? He didn't respond. He just made me watch. The parents prayed fervently, with absolute faith. The girl opened her eyes and smiled at them. Daddy, she said in a weak voice, I'm going to get better. Jesus will heal me. I dreamed about him last night. The father held her hand, tears streaming down his face. You will, my princess. You will. 3 days later, the scene changed again. We were at a cemetery. It was a girl's funeral. She hadn't been healed. She had died. Despite the prayers, despite the faith, despite the innocence. Where were you? I shouted at Jesus, who remained calm beside me. That child had faith in you. She believed, and you let her die. Her parents believed, and you disappointed them. I was there, he said calmly. Lie. If you were there, you would have done something. I was there when she was born. I was there in every moment of joy she had in her 7 years of life. I was there when she smiled, when she played, when she loved. I was there when she died, holding her hand, taking her home. That's not enough. She should have lived. She should have grown up, gotten married, had children of her own, not die at 7. Why, he asked, and there was challenge in his voice now. Why should she have lived? Because you, with your limited mind and narrow perspective, decided that would be the correct order of things? I stared at him, anger boiling inside me. You're blaming me now? I'm wrong for thinking children shouldn't die of cancer? I'm not blaming you, Michael. I'm challenging you to expand your perspective. You see 7 years of life as tragedy. I see 7 years of love, joy, and purpose. You see the end. I see the continuation in another place. That's just pretty talk to justify unnecessary suffering. Unnecessary according to your judgment. You assume you know the full picture, but you only see a tiny brushstroke. The scene changed again. Now we were back on the empty road. But this time, beside the road, there was a huge screen, like a movie screen floating in the air. Let me show you something. Jesus said, "This is your life, Michael. Let's review it together." No, I said immediately. I don't want to see. Why not? Afraid of what you'll find? Before I could protest further, the screen lit up. I saw myself at 8 years old, sitting in my family's kitchen in our old house. My mother was teaching me to pray before bed. I repeated the words mechanically, bored, want to go back to playing. You knew her love, Jesus said. She loved you more than life itself. The scene changed. I was 16, arguing with my mother in the living room. She was holding a Bible, begging me to go to church with her, just once. I was yelling that religion was for stupid people, that I didn't need fairy tales to live. I saw the tears in her eyes. I saw how my words hurt her. I was just a teenager, I said, looking away. Teenagers are stupid. Yes, they are, and I forgive that. But you never forgave yourself, did you? The screen showed more scenes. Me at 19, leaving home for college, barely saying goodbye to her. At 21, visiting her at Christmas and spending the whole time on my phone, ignoring her attempts to talk. At 22, skipping the Christmas service she had begged me to attend, choosing to stay home reading Nietzsche. And then came the scene I feared most. My parents on a plane, returning from a vacation in Florida. My mother was talking about me, worried. She told my father she was afraid I had lost my way, that she prayed every day for me to find my way back to God. My father, always more pragmatic, said it was just a phase, that I'd come back when I matured. My mother didn't seem convinced. She said she felt she was failing me, that she should have done something different. Then came the turbulence, the emergency, the crash, silence. Turn it off, I begged, tears streaming down my face. Please. But the screen continued. It showed me receiving the news, the funeral, me standing beside the closed caskets, not shedding a tear because rational men don't let themselves be dominated by emotions, as I had told myself. It showed me afterward, at home, finally alone, breaking down. It showed me finding my mother's journal, where she wrote about me, about her prayers for me, about the unconditional love she had for me even when I rejected her. I saw myself reading those pages and then, in a gesture of anger and pain, throwing the journal in the trash, because it was easier to reject everything than to face the guilt. You blamed her, Jesus said softly. You blamed her for loving you in a way you considered weak. You blamed her for having faith. And deep down, you blamed yourself for never having said you loved her back before it was too late. I was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. I was arrogant. I whispered. I was an arrogant idiot who thought he knew everything. Yes, you were, but she loved you anyway. And so do I. Those words hit me like lightning. How? How can you love someone who spent years denying your existence? Who mocked people who believed in you? who considered himself superior for not needing you. Because true love isn't conditional, Michael. I don't love only those who believe in me. I love everyone. Those who believe, those who doubt, those who deny. Love isn't something you earn through good behavior. It's a gift given freely. That doesn't make sense, I said, wiping the tears. From a logical standpoint, it doesn't make sense to love those who reject you. Love rarely makes sense from a logical standpoint. That's why it's so powerful. And so frightening for people like you, who want to explain everything with pure reason. The screen disappeared, and we were alone on the road again. I sat on the ground, exhausted emotionally and mentally. Jesus sat beside me, in silence, giving me time to process everything. After a long time, I managed to speak again. So my mother is here? In this place? She's at peace, he replied. She's happy, and she's waiting for you if you choose to come. If I choose, I repeated. So I have a choice? I thought I had died. Your body died, yes. The paramedics arrived quickly, tried to resuscitate you for 22 minutes. They couldn't. You're technically dead. But I'm giving you a choice that few people receive. What choice? I can send you back. I can resurrect your body, give you a second chance at life, but with one condition. There's always conditions, I said bitterly. The condition is that you live differently, that you open your heart. I'm not asking you to become a fanatic evangelist. I'm not asking you to spend the rest of your life in a church. But I'm asking you to stop closing your heart to the possibility of something greater than yourself. And if I refuse, if I say I still don't believe in you, that all this could be an elaborate hallucination of a dying brain, he smiled, then I'll love you anyway. And you can choose to move forward, meet your mother again, and rest. The choice is yours, Michael. It always has been. I was silent, thinking. Part of me still wanted to reject all of this, classify it as impossible, as anti-scientific. But another part, a part one had suppressed for years, was screaming to be heard. If I go back, I said slowly, I can't promise I'll believe completely. I can't promise I'll become religious. I'm not asking for promises, Michael. I'm asking for openness. I'm asking that you live with love instead of arrogance, that you listen instead of always wanting to be right, that you allow the possibility of mystery, of things your mind can't fully explain. Why, I asked, why do you care about me? Why not just let me go? I spent years denying you, hurting people in the name of atheism. Because I see beyond what you've done, he said, placing his hand on my shoulder. I see who you really are beneath all that intellectual armor. I see a frightened boy who lost his parents too early. I see a man who uses knowledge as a shield because he's afraid to be vulnerable. I see someone who is deeply lonely and has convinced himself he prefers it that way. His words broke something inside me. Some wall I had built over years, brick by brick, argument by argument. And behind that wall was all the pain I had never allowed myself to feel. The pain of losing my parents. The pain of never having told my mother I loved her. The pain of being alone in a world I had reduced to atoms and emptiness. I want to go back, I said, crying again. I want a second chance. I want to do things differently. Then go, he said, smiling. But remember this conversation, Michael. Remember that not everything can be explained. That mystery isn't the enemy of knowledge. That faith and reason can coexist. And remember that you are loved. You always have been. You always will be, no matter what you do or don't do. He touched my forehead, and everything went white. I woke with a violent start, inhaling air as if I were drowning. There were people around me, paramedics, someone shouting he's back. Bright lights, sirens, chaotic movement. I spent 4 days in the hospital. The doctors were confused. I had been clinically dead for 22 minutes. I shouldn't have come back, and if I did, I should have severe brain damage from lack of oxygen. But all the tests showed I was perfectly fine. A miracle, said one of the nurses. Medical coincidence, said the older doctor, clearly uncomfortable with the word miracle. My colleagues from the university came to visit me. My students sent cards. The department chair said I could take the semester off to recover. But I knew I didn't need time off. I needed change. When I got home, The first thing I did was search through old trash. It took hours going through boxes that had been stored for years. Finally, I found it. My mother's journal, yellowed and stained, but still readable. I read every page. Every prayer she had written for me. Every worry. Every moment of unconditional love. And this time, instead of throwing it away in anger, I hugged that journal against my chest and cried. I cried for her, for me, for the lost years, for the words never said. I can't say I became religious overnight. That wouldn't be honest. But I started going to church, just to sit and observe. I didn't pray. I still couldn't do that sincerely. But I watched the people who prayed. I saw the peace on their faces. And I began to understand that maybe it wasn't weakness. Maybe it was something I still didn't understand. My classes changed drastically. I still taught philosophy, still talked about atheism and existentialism. But now I also presented arguments from the other side, not as something to mock, but as valid perspectives that deserve serious consideration. Some students found the change strange. Others seemed grateful. One day, a student came to talk to me after class. He was a shy young man who always sat in the back. "Professor," he said hesitantly, "can I ask a personal question?" "Of course," I replied. "Are you still an atheist?" I thought about the question. I thought about the experience I had, which I still didn't know whether to classify as real or hallucination. I thought about Jesus sitting beside me on that empty road, saying he loved me despite everything. "I don't know," I replied honestly. I used to have absolute certainty that God didn't exist. Now I have doubts. And I've learned that doubt isn't weakness. Doubt is honesty. The student smiled. "Thank you, Professor. My father died last month, and I was having difficulty reconciling my faith with the loss. Your new classes are helping me think about it differently." When he left, I was alone in the empty classroom. And for the first time in 16 years, since before my parents' death, I prayed. It wasn't an elaborate prayer. I didn't use beautiful words or ready formulas. I just said quietly, "If you're there, thank you. Thank you for the second chance. Thank you for showing me I was wrong. Not about everything, maybe, but about what really matters. I still have doubts. I probably always will. But I'm open now. I'm listening. And I'm trying to love like you said I should." There was no audible answer. There were no miraculous signs. But there was silence. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. Months passed. I started volunteering at a homeless shelter, not to evangelize or convert anyone, just to help, to be present, to show love in practical ways, not just theoretical. It was there that I met Pastor James, a 70-year-old man who dedicated his entire life to that place. One night, after everyone had eaten and gone to sleep, he sat with me in the small courtyard of the shelter. "You've changed," he said without preamble. "How do you know?" I asked. "I've heard about you for years. The atheist professor who destroyed students' faith. But now you're here, serving soup to homeless people." Something happened. I told him everything. About the heart attack, about the experience I had, about Jesus and the conversation we had, about my mother and the guilt I had carried for years. He listened in silence, without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know it could have been a hallucination, right? That skeptics have explanations for near-death experiences?" "I know," I replied. "And part of me still thinks it might have been just that. But another part doesn't think so," he said, smiling. "Another part knows it was real. And you know what's interesting, Michael? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was hallucination or real experience. What matters is the effect it had on you. You came out of that experience a better person, more loving, more open. That's what counts." His words freed me from something. I realized he was right. I had spent my whole life needing absolute certainties. I needed conclusive proof that God didn't exist. Now, I needed conclusive proof that he did. But maybe life wasn't about certainties. Maybe it was about living well in uncertainty. Today, 3 years after that Tuesday in September, my life is unrecognizable compared to what it was. I'm still a philosophy professor. I still teach about atheism, agnosticism, all perspectives. But now I also talk about intellectual humility, about the limits of human knowledge, about how it's possible to be intelligent and have faith, or be intelligent and not have faith, and both positions deserve respect. I reconnected with a family I had pushed away. My Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, cried when I called her for the first time in 11 years. Now I have lunch with her every Sunday. She tells me stories about my mother I had never heard, and I really listen, instead of being impatient to get back to my books and my solitude. I met someone, a woman named Emma, who works as a therapist at the same shelter where I volunteer. She's religious, but not in a suffocating way. She has doubts too. We can talk about everything, from theology to astrophysics, without ever feeling like I need to prove I'm right or convince her of something. It's liberating. But the biggest change is internal. That arrogance I carry like a badge of honor disappeared. Not because I became less intelligent or less educated, but because I understood that intelligence without empathy is cruelty. Knowledge without love is empty. Reason without heart is cold and sterile. Sometimes, especially at night, I wonder if that experience was real. If I really talked to Jesus on that empty road. If I really saw my life pass in review. If I was really given a second chance, or if it was all a hallucination induced by a failing brain. And then I remember Pastor James's words. It doesn't matter. What matters is that today I live differently. Today I listen more than I talk. Today I admit when I don't know something instead of inventing arrogant explanations. Today I can look at a religious person and see not weakness, but perhaps a form of strength I hadn't considered before. A few weeks ago, a student came to my office after class. She was crying. She told me her brother had died in a motorcycle accident, and she was questioning everything. Why did God allow this? Why do good people suffer? The same questions I had asked on that road. But this time, instead of giving ready answers, instead of using that as an opportunity to deconstruct her faith, I simply hugged her. I let her cry. And when she could finally speak again, I said the only honest thing I could say. I don't know why these things happen. I don't know if there's a divine plan, or if it's all random. But I know your pain is real, that your love for your brother is real, and that you don't need to have all the answers now. It's okay to feel anger, to feel pain, to question everything. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. She looked at me with those eyes red from crying and asked, "Professor, do you believe in God?" I thought carefully before answering. I believe there's something greater than us. I don't know if it's a Christian God or any other religion's God, but I believe there's love in the universe, that there's purpose, that we're not completely alone in a cold and indifferent cosmos. That's enough for me now. She nodded and left a little lighter, and I stayed there alone, thinking about how that answer would have been impossible 3 years ago, on the anniversary of my mother's death. For the first time since the funeral, I went to the cemetery. I brought flowers, sat on the grass next to her headstone, and talked. I talked about everything that had happened, about the near-death experience, about the changes in my life, about Emma, about how I finally understood the love she had for me, even when I didn't deserve it. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, with tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry for being so arrogant, for rejecting you, for never having said I loved you before it was too late. I hope that wherever you are, you can forgive me, and I hope you're proud of the person I'm becoming now." The wind blew gently, moving the leaves of the trees around. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something, a presence, a warmth, a peace. It could have been my imagination. It could have been the wind, or it could have been her, saying she had forgiven me a long time ago. I don't know, and it's okay not to know. If you're reading this or hearing this story, it doesn't matter if you're religious, atheist, agnostic, or anything else. The lesson I learned isn't about which belief is right. It's about humility. It's about love. It's about recognizing that none of us have all the answers, and that's okay. You can be the smartest person in the room and still be completely wrong about the most important things. You can have all the logical arguments in the world and still miss what really matters: human connection, love, empathy, purpose. I spent years trying to prove God didn't exist. And in the end, it was in the silence of my broken arrogance, it was in the absence of all my certainties, that I found something real. I didn't find definitive proof. I didn't have a dramatic conversion where I suddenly believed in everything. But I found openness. I found humility. I found a possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's more mystery in this universe than my limited mind can comprehend. And that doesn't make me less intelligent. It makes me wiser. The lesson Jesus gave me on that empty road, real or imagined, was simple. Silence teaches more than all words. When I finally silenced my arrogant voice, when I stopped having to always be right, when I let silence in, that's when I learned. The silence didn't prove the existence or non-existence of God. It proved something deeper. It proved I was empty, that all my certainty was just fear in disguise, that my intellectual arrogance was armor against vulnerability, and that in the end, what we all really need, whether we believe in God or not, is love. It's connection. It's meaning. Today, when I teach classes, I always end with the same phrase. Question everything, including your own certainties. But while you question, never forget to love. Because in the end, when everything else disappears, when all theories and arguments turn to dust, love is what remains. If you're facing doubts about your faith or lack thereof, if you're questioning everything, if you feel lost between what you believed and what you think now, know that you're not alone. And know that you don't need to have all the answers. Nobody does. Not the most religious, not the most atheist. We're all navigating this mystery called existence the best way we can. My mother used to say, and I read this in her journal, that God speaks loudest in silence. I used to mock that. How can something speak loud in silence? It's contradictory. It's illogical. But now I understand. In the silence of all my broken arrogance, in the silence of my finally open heart, in the silence of my mind stopping trying to explain everything, that's when I heard something. Not an audible voice, not clear words, but something, a presence, a love, a certainty that I'm not alone. And that certainty doesn't come from logical arguments or scientific proof. It comes from experience. It comes from transformation. It comes from becoming a better person, more loving, more open. And if that's God or brain chemistry or evolution or any other explanation, honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that it works, that it makes me want to be better, that it makes me love more, that it gives me purpose. And in the end, isn't that what we're all looking for? So this is my story, the story of the arrogant atheist who had to die to learn to live, who had to lose everything to find what really matters, who had to silence his voice to finally hear. And if you take just one thing from this story, let it be this. Be humble. Be open. Admit you don't know everything. And while you search for answers, while you question, while you doubt, never stop loving. Because in the end, love is the only thing we really prove exists. And maybe, just maybe, love is the best definition of God we can have. 3 years after that Tuesday in September, I no longer have absolute certainties about the universe, but I have peace, I have love, I have purpose, and I have gratitude for that second chance, real or imagined. Because what Jesus taught me in that silence of the empty road was the most important lesson, that sometimes we need to die to our certainties, to our arrogance, to our ego, before we can really live. And today I'm living, finally, truly living. I started a podcast where I interview people from all walks of life, all belief systems, all backgrounds. I let them share their stories without judgment, without trying to prove them wrong. It's called The Open Mind, and it's been growing steadily. People write to me saying they feel seen, heard, understood in ways they haven't before. Emma and I got engaged last month. We're planning a simple wedding, nothing extravagant. She wants in her church, and I agreed. Not because I'm fully convinced of everything that church teaches, but because I respect her faith and I want to honor it. And honestly, there's something beautiful about making vows before something greater than ourselves, whether I fully understand it or not. Aunt Sarah tells me my mother will be proud. I don't know if that's true, but I hope it is. I hope that wherever she is, she knows I finally understand what she was trying to tell me all those years. That love is more important than being right. That connection is more valuable than intellectual superiority. That sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is admit you don't have all the answers. Last week, I stood in front of my class and did something I never thought I'd do. I apologized. I apologized to every student I had hurt with my arrogance over the years, to everyone whose faith I had mocked, to everyone I had made feel small because their beliefs didn't align with mine. Some students looked uncomfortable. Some looked confused. But a few had tears in their eyes. And after class, one of them came up to me and said, "Thank you, Professor. That meant more than you know. That's all I can ask for now. To mean something. To matter. Not because I'm the smartest or the most educated or the most right, but because I'm trying every day to be more loving, more open, more human." The silence taught me what all my words never could. It taught me that I don't need to have everything figured out. That uncertainty is not my enemy. That doubt and faith can coexist in the same heart. That love is more powerful than logic, more enduring than arguments, more real than any proof I could ever construct. So if you're listening to this, if this story has reached you somehow, I want you to know it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to question. It's okay to doubt. But don't let that doubt close your heart. Don't let it make you cruel or arrogant or cold. Stay open. Stay curious. Stay humble. And above all, stay loving. Because in the end, when everything else fades away, when all our certainties crumble and all our arguments fall silent, love is what remains. Love is what's real. Love is what matters. And maybe, just maybe, love is all the proof we need. 3 years ago, I died. My heart stopped, my brain shut down, and I ceased to exist in the way I understood existence. And in that death, in that silence, in that emptiness, I found something I had been running for my whole life. I found that I was loved, not because I was smart or successful or right, but simply because I existed. And that love, whether it came from God or the universe or some deep connection between all living things, changed everything. Today I teach my students that the most important questions don't always have clear answers. That "I don't know" is sometimes the most honest and courageous thing you can say. That mystery isn't something to be conquered, but something to be respected, maybe even embraced. I tell them about a road I once walked. Whether in dream or reality, I still can't say for certain. I tell them about a conversation that broke me open and remade me into something better. And I tell them that the silence between their certainties might be exactly where they need to listen most carefully, because that's where truth lives, not in our arguments or our proofs or our intellectual victories, but in the quiet spaces where we stop trying to be right and start trying to be real. Emma asked me the other night if I believe in God now. We were lying in bed, her head on my chest, both of us staring at the ceiling in the dark. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I believe in love. I finally said, I believe in transformation. I believe in second chances. I believe that there's something in this universe that wants us to be better, to connect, to care for each other. Whether that something is God or just the best part of what makes us human, I'm not sure it matters. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mother would say that's God. That God is love. And when you love, you're experiencing God whether you call it that or not." Maybe she's right, I said. Maybe the name doesn't matter as much as the experience. The other day, I visited my parents' grave for what had become a monthly ritual. I sat there in the grass, talking to my mother like she could hear me. Maybe she can, maybe she can't. But it helps me to talk, to process, to remember. I told her about Emma, about the podcast, about the students whose lives I hope I'm touching in positive ways now instead of destructive ones. About how I finally understand what she meant when she said that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting even when you don't. I'm trying, Mom, I said. I'm really trying to be the person you always believed I could be. Not perfect, not without doubts, but open, loving, real. The wind rustled through the trees overhead, and a leaf fell into my lap. I picked it up, examined its intricate veins, the way sunlight filtered through it, the complexity of something so simple and so easily overlooked. That's when it hit me. That's the lesson I had missed for so many years. I had been so busy looking for grand proofs and logical arguments that I missed the evidence that was everywhere, in the complexity of a leaf, in the improbable existence of consciousness, in the way love can change a person from the inside out, in the fact that anything exists at all rather than nothing. These aren't proofs in the scientific sense. They don't hold up in formal debate, but they're something. They're whispers. They're invitations to wonder rather than to know with certainty. And maybe that's the point. Maybe God, if God exists, doesn't want to be proven like a mathematical theorem. Maybe the divine wants to be experienced, felt, lived, encountered in moments of openness rather than captured in arguments and evidence. I don't know. I truly don't know. And I've made peace with that. If you're hearing this story and you're struggling with faith, with doubt, with questions that keep you up at night, I want to tell you something important. You're not alone. Whether you end up believing or not believing, whether you find answers or learn to live with questions, you're not alone. And whatever you do, don't make the mistake I made. Don't close your heart in the name of being right. Don't sacrifice love on the altar of intellectual certainty. Don't push away the people who care about you because they believe differently than you do. Because here's what I learned on that road, in that silence, in that moment between death and life. Love is the only thing that survives. Knowledge fades. Certainties crumble. Arguments are forgotten. But love remains. Love transforms. Love redeems. 3 years ago, I was the smartest person I knew. I had all the answers. I could dismantle any argument for God's existence. I could make religious people feel small and foolish. I was intellectually superior, or so I thought. Today, I'm still educated. I still value knowledge and reason and logic, but I've learned that these things are tools, not gods. They're means, not ends. They're important, but they're not everything. And the most important things, the things that make life worth living, can't be fully captured by logic alone. Love, beauty, purpose, connection, meaning. These things are real. They matter. They shape our lives in profound ways, even though we can't put them under a microscope or prove them with equations. I spent my whole life before that Tuesday trying to reduce reality to what could be measured and proven. And in doing so, I missed the richness, the depth, the mystery that makes life worth living. Now I live in that mystery. I embrace it. I let it challenge me, stretch me, humble me, and I'm happier than I've ever been, despite having fewer certainties than ever before. So this is my final message. The lesson I want to leave you with: the silence proved something that day. Not that God exists or doesn't exist in the way I used to frame those questions. It proved something more important. It proved that I was empty without love, that my certainties were shields against vulnerability, that my arrogance was covering up fear and pain, that I had been running from the very things that could have saved me. The silence stripped away everything I thought I knew and left me with one undeniable truth. I am loved. You are loved. We are all loved, whether we believe it or not, whether we deserve it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And when we let that love in, when we stop fighting it with our need to be right, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to receive it, everything changes. That's what Jesus showed me if it was Jesus. That's what the experience taught me, whether it was real or hallucination. That's what death revealed to me before giving me back to life. Love is real. Love transforms. Love is enough. Everything else, all the arguments and proofs and certainties, they're just noise. Beautiful noise sometimes, useful noise often, but noise nonetheless. The signal, the truth that matters most, comes through in the silence. When we stop talking and start listening. When we stop defending and start receiving. When we stop trying to be right and start trying to be real. 3 years later, I'm still learning, still growing, still making mistakes, still having doubts. But I'm alive in a way I never was before. And that life, that transformation, that second chance, is my evidence. Not for anyone else, just for me. It's enough. If this story has reached you, if it's touched something in you, if it's made you think or feel or question, then I'm grateful. Share it if you want. Keep it to yourself if you prefer. Agree with it or disagree with it. That's all fine. Just don't close your heart. Don't let fear or pride or the need to be certain make you miss what's real. Don't push away love because you can't explain it. Don't reject mystery because you can't solve it. Stay open. Stay humble. Stay curious. Stay loving. That's all any of us can do. And maybe, just maybe, it's enough. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. And thank you for being open enough to hear it. Whatever you believe or don't believe, may you find your own road. May you have your own encounters. May you discover, in whatever way works for you, that you're not alone, you're not unloved, and you're not without purpose. And may you find the courage to live in the beautiful, terrifying, wondrous mystery of existence, knowing that not having all the answers doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes it means you're finally found. This is Michael, signing off, not as an atheist, not as a believer, but as a human being trying his best to love well and live honestly. And that, I've learned, is all any of us can really do if the story moved you in any way. If it made you reflect on your own certainties or doubts, leave your comment below sharing your perspective. It doesn't matter if you're religious or atheist. We're all on this journey together, seeking meaning and purpose. And if you know someone who's struggling with questions of faith, purpose, or loss, share this story with them. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in our doubts is exactly what we need. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that make you think, question, and grow. Because life is a journey of discovery, and it's much better to take that journey together. Take care, and until the next story.